How do you follow up the behemoth that was Saints Row 2? In the 2-year gap between the first and second games, Volition relentlessly worked to deliver a remarkable follow-up that could stand tall against the GTA franchise. Despite the praise and colossal success of Saints Row 2, there was still an overwhelming number of critics and casual players who couldn't resist comparing it to Grand Theft Auto 4, which was released just months prior. This led the studio to pivot directions for future entries that would further set this franchise apart. After 3 years full of numerous prototypes, scrapped projects, and fan hype, the world was finally introduced to Saints Row the Third, a game that breathed new life into the franchise. Tired of playing second fiddle to GTA, Volition took the franchise to new heights, giving it a brand new identity. However, it would be an understatement to say the reception for this game in recent years has become mixed. While some believe this new direction was for the betterment of the series, others perceive it as the beginning of its decline. There's definitely a lot to discuss, so let's dive into this continuation of the Saints Row franchise.
Pack it up, we gotta move.
I got 20K on this game. Damn!
Now it's a draw.
This isn't over. So,
Put everything into the game. That was the design philosophy for Saints Row 2 and made for a disjointed title with varied tones, according to design director Scott Phillips. At a GDC conference, he went on to say,
"The tone was not well defined in Saints Row 2. We refined it through trial and error. We tried a bunch of different things. We would throw out ideas. We would see what stuck. The problem was that inconsistencies were all over the place. Now with Saints Row the Third, we wanted to have a cohesive experience. That was one of our main goals, was the whole experience should feel like it's one note. It's the same feeling you get throughout the entire game."
But the question arises, what content would be appropriate to keep a consistent tone for its sequel? This proved to be challenging, especially when only 20% of the team had shipped a Saints Row game previously. All of these factors created a lack of confidence going into the third entry. Development for the next Saints Row game began in September 2008, a month before the release of Saints Row 2. Initially, the team messed around with a choice-based concept where you are an undercover agent infiltrating the Saints, but it was dropped as it didn't align with the rest of the series. It just wasn't Saints Row. Without a clear vision for the future of Saints Row, the team made a tone video featuring a montage of film scenes and music from Bad Boys 2, Hot Fuzz, and Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart. This helped them to find the right direction, which would define the future of the franchise. Their new design mantra became, "Embrace the crazy, fun trumps all." This approach aimed to set the third Saints Row game apart from other open world titles, turning it into a true AAA game. Producer Greg Donovan even considers it more of a soft reboot for the series than a direct sequel to Saints Row 2. He would go on to say the stories for Saints Row 1 and Saints Row 2 were semi-serious, but with the third, we got to look at the whole package and decided that we wanted it all to be cohesive. The team wanted the art, the city, and the story to match the insane gameplay that players loved, aiming to create memorable moments that would stick with players long after the game was over. Most importantly, they didn't want the player to be a dick. Saints Row the Third was first announced in March 2011, with its first trailer being released at E3 2011. I can't emphasize how epic this trailer was and still is.
With some light-skinned girls and some Kelly Rose. In this white man world, we the ones chosen. This is way too much, I need a moment.
I'd argue that this trailer alone is what sold the game to millions of people around the world, and the marketing campaign wouldn't slow down from there. No, there weren't porn stars advertising the game, but there was a car wash at E3, Broken Pixels making a rap.
What do you do when you lost that power? What do you do when you need that power? How do you satisfy the greed for that power? Who do you kill cause the world was ours?
And women giving out gas in Australia, which are only a handful of the crazy events the team put together. Volition and THQ were extremely confident in this entry, and it showed. 2 weeks before the game was released, pre-order numbers showed that it had 4 times the number of pre-orders compared to Saints Row 2. Saints Row the Third was released on November 15th, 2011 for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC. It received positive reviews, landing within the same range as Saints Row 2. By January 2012, the game had sold 3.8 million copies, surpassing what its predecessor made in almost 2 years. This success prompted THQ to shift its focus to bigger franchises moving forward. Expecting to ship anywhere from 5 to 6 million units, the game would go on to sell 5.5 million copies by the end of 2012 and would only go up from there as the game would be released on different platforms over the years. Saints Row III marked a major turning point for the series. Whether that was for better or worse is completely up to one's opinion, but it's undeniable that millions of people loved this game. For many, this was their entry into the Saints Row universe. I mentioned in my previous video that Saints Row 2 was my first Saints Row game, but it was Saints Row III that really got me into the series and truly made me a fan. Granted, I was only 11 years old when I played this game, but it looked cool and was fun as hell to play. While reviews for the game are great, and a lot of people seem to love the game still, there's been a lot of negativity towards this entry in recent years. For these reasons, I am intrigued with how well this entry holds up all these years later, especially after I have played the first 2 entries extensively.
Impossible. How could they miss the signal?
They're keeping it here.
Clever.
Okay, nerd time is over. What is this thing? And Kinsey, for fuck's sake, keep it simple.
Before really diving into the game's presentation, it's important to clarify which version I'll be covering for this video. The series has greatly expanded from the first entry, which is locked to the Xbox 360. Saints Row III has been able to reach a broader audience with releases on multiple consoles. As I mentioned previously, the game was released on PS3, 360, and PC, the latter having a much more stable port this time around as it was done in-house. In May of 2019, the game was ported to the Nintendo Switch, and in 2020 received a full remaster for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. It's also received a free upgrade for the PS5 and Series X and S, enabling it to run better on current-gen consoles. While I own a copy on PS3 and PC, I had the remastered version sitting around for a couple years now, so that's the version I ended up using for this video. However, I will include footage from the PC version on occasion. From the start, it's evident that Saints Row III's presentation has undergone a massive change compared to its predecessors. The 3-year gap between Saints Row 2 and Saints Row III allowed its graphical changes to stand out, especially in a year filled with graphical powerhouses like Batman Arkham City and Uncharted 3. The game's more cartoonish art direction was appealing to me personally, and it's all thanks to the new engine that's being used here. Volition's using a proprietary engine known as Core Technology Group, and it helped to give the game a fresh coat of paint with a vibrant and colorful appearance. Steelport trades in jagged and rundown districts for towering skyscrapers and factories spread throughout the different islands. This is sadly where Steelport let me down. Whether it's the original version or the remastered one, the city of Steelport feels bland. While I couldn't find an exact number, Steelport is smaller than the version of Stillwater we got from Saints Row 2, but size isn't the biggest issue in my eyes. There weren't too many distinct buildings or districts that stood out to me. In Stillwater there was Chinatown, Stillwater University, and the iconic Saints Row district. These areas had their charm, something I didn't quite find in Steelport. Instead, this world is divided into 4 different islands with long stretches of buildings that feel all too similar. The developers designed the city intending to make its locations recognizable without relying so heavily on a mini-map. There are some recognizable spots on the map, like the Murder Brawl Arena, the Saints' main headquarters, and a giant statue on its own island. However, the overall layout of Steelport lacks anything distinct, and after a while, everything just starts to blur together. It presents a different aesthetic, but at the end of the day, it just made for an uninteresting world. Even the stores lack the charm and uniqueness found in previous entries. Some notable exclusions, like the absence of freckle bitches, leave something to be desired. Food in general feels like a big omission. Saints Flow is the biggest item the Saints are advertising, and it would have been so cool if that was an option to drink. It could have given the player some cool buffs that we do end up seeing in one of the DLCs. It's just a missed opportunity. The only new store here is Planet Saints, which I will say is a nice addition to the game, offering Saints merch. The stores do serve their purpose, but it's that little something extra that's missing. No walking in on a robbery or employees saying something snarky or funny after each transaction.
Oh, you come back anytime you want some sloppy seconds.
This brings me to the city's biggest weakness. It has no life to it. NPCs added excitement and fun when exploring Stillwater. Now, they simply walk along the sidewalks, occasionally throwing out generic insults or complimenting the player. The interactions and funny moments that characterize NPCs in the previous games are missing here. Some will randomly come up to you waiting for a compliment, but overall, the NPCs feel like a major downgrade. I didn't pay too much attention to the different types of NPCs, but there certainly are some that will stand out in a crowd. You'll always run into the occasional mascot or stripper freely showing her goods to the people. One positive I can give is the improved character models. They all look great, and this is thanks to the new engine I mentioned before. This is an aspect I prefer way more than I did in Saints Row 2. However, the remaster takes this aspect to new heights. I've seen reviews give a lot of criticism to the remaster, saying it doesn't meet the typical standards, but I heavily disagree. I believe Spirasoft, the studio behind the remaster, did an outstanding job enhancing an already good-looking game. The world is sharper, it runs smoothly at a constant 60 frames per second, and the lighting plays a significant role in making Steelport feel more alive, something it desperately needs. It looks fine during the day, but take a VTOL out during the night, and the city is full of color with neon lights and billboards igniting the sky. But like I was saying, the remaster significantly improved the character models, and it was a welcoming improvement. While the original versions weren't ugly by any means, the increased level of detail brings the characters to life and makes them appear more realistic by 2023 standards. Some may argue that it loses some of the original's charm, and I can agree to an extent. For instance, I do prefer the original version of Shaundi, who already received a massive makeover from Saints Row 2, but characters like Killbane look way more intimidating in the remaster. The only character I will not defend is Cyrus. What the fuck is this? I'm not entirely sure what the issue is because it was never consistent. Other than this small blemish, the rest of the character models in the remaster look phenomenal. This even extends to their icons, which have been updated and accurately reflect the changes from the remaster. Characters are also voiced well, which shouldn't come as a surprise at this point. The boss still has 3 male and 3 female voice options, with absolute powerhouses from the industry behind them. Troy Baker and Laura Bailey are 2 standout choices and my favorite voice actors within the industry, so it was a no-brainer for me to have them voice my version of the boss.
This is foreign soil now. Come at my city again, and you'll go home in a fucking box. Back to you.
Undead cleanup ain't exactly in our wheelhouse, but hey, we'll give it a whirl. Aren't you worried about pissing off S.T.A.G?
Of course, we can't forget about the others who deliver excellent interpretations as well. There's Kenny Blank, who's the only person from the last game to return, Robin Atkin-Downs, Tara Platt, and Rebecca Santabria. The most random inclusion would have to be a zombie, who is voiced by the talented Steve Blum.
I think I found us a new place. See, that's the beauty of this place. It's owned by the Morningstar.
All of these performances align perfectly with the boss's cocky and laid-back personality, with clever writing that allows the actors to convey all of the emotions effectively through your chosen voice. A part of me does wish that more cast members from Saints Row 2 could have returned to keep things consistent, particularly Katie Samine, who I used for my female character before. She was the standout to me, and I could have easily seen her fit into this game. However, most of our main crew does return and continues to deliver wonderful performances. Daniel Day Kim as Johnny Gat continues to be the standout, even in the criminally short amount of time that he's in the game.
Burke's right. We traded our dicks in for pussies. Seriously. Movie deals, commercials. Saint's name used to mean something more than body spray and some ass-tasting energy drink.
And Arif Kenshin continues to be the lovable goofball that is Pierce.
No, Powder's a designer gun store downtown. I saw some of Loren's thugs talking to the owner. There's gotta be something there.
However, the most obvious change is with Shaundi. Eliza Dushku, who played her before, is replaced by Danielle Nicolette.
You don't want to know.
Fine, be like that. So where are we going?
Look, I was really high the last time I was here. Just drive, it'll come back to me.
While I miss Dushku's performance, Nicolette does a good enough job in her place. Just like every entry, there's an impressive lineup of new characters voiced by even more talented actors. You have Andrew Bowen voicing the eccentric Josh Burke.
Hey, you guys want to do some warm-ups before we shoot? You look familiar.
Mark Allen Stewart as Oleg.
Philip likes his things custom made. And for his brutes, I am the master pattern, you see.
Natalie Lander as the socially awkward Kenzie.
You can do a lot worse. If Matt gets the Decker Usenet plugged into its central power grid, it's... Trust me, it's bad.
And Rick Wasserman providing a chilling performance as Eddie Kilbane Pryor.
Kilbane, it's just a match.
It's my fucking reputation! This isn't my city. I am its Caesar!
Yuri Lowenthal, who was in Saints Row 2, shines in this game, providing voices for Matt Miller, Genki, and Andy in the Gangstas in Space DLC.
That's lovely, but I feel it's time for me to move on. To be honest, I'm a little scared of, well, dying.
I'm glad he was able to flex his acting muscles more in this game. Lastly, keeping with tradition, former porn star Sasha Grey delivers a noteworthy performance as Viola de Winter.
You may continue to operate the Saints Ultor Media Group as you see fit, in exchange for 66% of your monthly gross revenue.
I can definitely say it's a million times better than what Tara Patrick did in the last game. Now I could go on, but like my last two videos, we would be here all day, so let's move on to the game's animations. The continued use of motion capture adds nuance and gives the hundreds of animations their enthusiastic expression. Whether it's hijacking cars, performing the new finishers, or delivering compliments, the motions feel more fluid and realistic. This also extends to the cutscenes, which remain cinematic, although some can be awkwardly placed and very short for some odd reason. However, that doesn't take away from the high production value that is put on display. As always, music continues to play an essential role in the franchise. This time there is an original score that is composed by Malcolm Kirby Jr., and it perfectly accompanies the intense action during the many story missions. However, it's surprisingly short, with only 8 songs making up the soundtrack. There's a lot of music in this game, but most of it is composed by other artists. Everything just felt so consistent, and I was convinced that everything was handled by Kirby. When it comes to licensed music, while it doesn't reach the absolute highs of Saints Row 2's enormous mix, the music that makes up Saints Row the Third was still fantastic. Featuring roughly 130 songs, I was always guaranteed to find a hit like Fantasy on the Mix, or something I haven't quite heard before on K-Rhyme. Something Saints Row the Third does the best out of the 3 games so far is its use of licensed music in the missions themselves. A handful of missions seem to be built around the use of a specific song, helping to enhance the mission and making it even more memorable. Of course, you all know about Power by Kanye West during an early mission where we take over a Morningstar penthouse, or Holding Out for a Hero by Bonnie Tyler during the game's final mission. It's during more low-key moments where the music can shine through, like Pierce and the Boss singing What I Got by Sublime,
Right early in the morning, rising to the street.
Light me up that cigarette and I'll strap shoes on my feet.
But the one track that really caught me off guard was You're the Best during our cage match with Kilbane, channeling my inner Danielson.
It's gotta be getting slick on that floor.
Hey, I gotta get my grandma to get the mop. Oh my goodness, look at the blood fly.
I could have had a V8.
These moments help to make these missions stand out amongst everything else, and it's honestly surprising that Volition was able to keep the rights to these songs all these years later, keeping the magic that made it special in 2011 alive almost 12 years later. As a final note before moving on to the gameplay, I rarely had any technical trouble plague my experience. The only issue that was prominent came with audio. There were times when the mixing was a bit wonky with the audio cutting out,
Well, the De Winters are keeping Zemos at safe word.
Translation, please.
or lines of dialogue overlapping each other.
I was thinking, Kinsey did a pretty good job with that Matt Miller thing.
Yeah,
What, I
she
can't say
did.
go team? What can I say? Things haven't been all
It was annoying, but not a total deal breaker. Besides that, the game rarely suffered from anything drastic like dips in frame rate or crashes, which made for a very smooth experience throughout my many gameplay sessions. The gameplay in Saints Row the Third is the best it's ever been in the entire series so far. Starting off, the level of customization in this game has gone above and beyond what we've seen previously with both Saints Row games, and this begins with the extensive character customization. You have absolute freedom to create your own unique character with a variety of presets and the ability to customize every single detail. The biggest element that will separate everyone's version of the boss are the different skin colors. Red, blue, gold, sapphire. There are plenty of options at hand. I may or may not have a thing for green woman, so I tried to go the She-Hulk route for my character, but I decided to keep things on brand and go with a Saints Purple. From here you can explore the vast selection of hairstyles, facial features, and makeup options. Personality is still a major feature, allowing you to choose from the 7 different voices, along with the dozens of compliments and taunts. These can help to add a humorous touch or add something a bit juvenile to the mix. Moving on to clothes, there is a huge selection to choose from. Starting with Planet Saints, this is where you're going to find your more normal clothing that lines up with the Saints brand. Let's Pretend continues to offer a wacky selection of costumes, ranging from a cheerleader, a superhero, or even a furry if you're into that kind of stuff. Nobody Loves Me continues to cater to that emo punk style with a few outfits that set itself apart like a steampunk or Matrix-like outfit. Then of course there's leather and lace dealing with everything from lingerie to some weirder fetishes. While this is the store where you can make your character practically naked, there's actually some really decent outfits here that will keep your player's dignity intact. If you're truly curious, there's even a secret room in the back that has what I assume to be the devs all advertising different costumes. This is the type of stuff I love seeing in games because it really shows the amount of fun everyone was having making this game. With that in mind, even though I gave the store some flack earlier, the interiors are amazing. Each one gives off a different vibe, from Nobody Loves Me and its giant razor hanging on the wall, to Planet Saints oozing with everything purple and Saints merch. The only downside to all of this is that the DLC options are mixed in, which makes searching for the right clothing option a bit cumbersome. The original version has an icon next to these options, making it much more easier to navigate. The last aspect when it comes to character customization is with the tattoos. I don't usually talk about this part of customization too much, but there were some really awesome tattoo designs that were throwbacks to Saints Row 2. I definitely had to get some ink to commemorate the Brotherhood. With a plethora of options, everyone's version of the boss will be unique to themselves. I can see why Volition put so much work into allowing you to share your characters online. I wish this was still available today for the older games, since I was too young to really get into all of this. When it comes to vehicle customization, this is easily the most it has ever received in that regard. There are plenty of performance upgrades that increase the speed of your vehicle, give it more durability, among other things. From here, it's the many body mods that make each vehicle stand out, dozens of paint colors on top of the paint types, rims, and so much more. I'm not sure if you could do this in the last game, but motorcycles can even be customized, which is a really nice addition. Everything also handles as smooth as butter. Most of the cars you unlock or find are pretty fast, helping you reach your destination quickly. To help make the trip even smoother, arrows appear in the world, guiding you in the right direction, so you don't have to rely on the minimap so much. While it took time to break my habit of constantly looking at the map, this is honestly an innovative mechanic that no one seems to implement in their games nowadays. There are plenty of open world games that I feel would benefit from this. Also, the car gives off a blinker when it's time to turn. That's awesome! What's also awesome is the expanded selection of vehicles you can roam around in, with tanks now being thrown in the mix. There's also a ton of planes, helicopters, and boats. The newest addition to the game has to be the VTOL, an extremely fast and powerful jet that can get you across the map and clear out enemies in no time. What's nice is that it comes with 2 different modes, behaving like a helicopter by default and transforming into an aircraft with the press of a button. Just like the previous games, after some time, you'll have a lengthy list of vehicles to choose from, aside from those you happen to find in the open world, which you can quickly hijack. The last aspect in terms of customization is with your cribs, which has unfortunately seen a major downgrade. Most of them don't even come with customization options at all, and the ones that do are very limited. You're not really customizing how it looks, but more so upgrading them, giving you numerous perks like the amount of money you earn per hour. The real change happens on the outside, as all of the interiors are practically the same. It is disappointing, but I can kind of give them a pass since most of the safe houses have already been established, like Shondi's ex's apartment or Zemos' safe house. On the upside, these cribs have plenty of weird things you can find. I don't even want to get started on what I saw in the bathroom, but at least there's this Easter egg laced magazine cover. Gang customization returns and has been overhauled as well. This time you can customize each individual gang member so you can have a taste of everything. You can have a group of kick-ass women or a team full of mascots. Now to the actual gunplay of the game, which is still exceptional. Again, the core mechanics haven't changed all that much throughout the series, but this is the tightest the controls have ever been. The weapon selection isn't as expansive as I originally thought it was, but there's still a decent selection of pistols, SMGs, and assault rifles. Since the DLC weapons were available from the start, there are plenty of fun and interesting weapons to choose from, like the Shark-O-Matic that shoots fish guts, luring a shark from below, or a mollusk launcher that controls its host before you can blow them up. If you prefer to take the action up close, there is the game's signature weapon, the Penetrator. Going around and smacking people with a giant purple dildo bat is not something I can say I've done in any other game, and it never failed to put a smile on my face. With that in mind, this does bring me to the melee combat, which has been scaled back compared to Saints Row 2. Some mechanics have been removed completely, like the different fighting stances each gang had. There isn't a major emphasis on melee combat like there was in the last game, so I can see why this feature was omitted. I will say the best addition was in the form of takedowns. Sprinting towards someone and pressing the right trigger performs a takedown on an enemy. There are a lot of animations here, and the majority of them are satisfying to watch. The same goes for when you want to hit somebody in the balls. With all of the new weapons and ways of taking down enemies, this introduces a major addition, which would be upgrades for both weapons and the player. In terms of weapons, there are 4 different tiers for most of them that increase damage or reduce the amount of recoil. Once you max out the weapons upgrade, it unlocks an additional perk. For instance, maxing out the upgrades for an SMG gives it armor-piercing rounds, or turns the flashbang into a fart in the jar, causing anyone in the radius to become nauseous. There were a couple of weapons that were disappointing when it came to upgrades though. The Annihilator quickly comes to mind. In 2, you were able to lock onto enemy vehicles from the get-go, but this feature is locked. This wouldn't be such a big deal, except the missions where you do use the Annihilator allows you to use all of its features, which felt odd. The other side of upgrades is in terms of your character. Before really getting into this though, it's important to talk about respect, the main gameplay feature of the series. What will come as a massive blessing to many is that respect is no longer needed to play story missions. The reason for this change is that, simply, the Saints are at the top of their game. They no longer need to grind from the bottom anymore. So instead of having respect be used for missions, it's used for the long list of upgrades. This RPG-like system of leveling up is something I feel the series has needed from the very beginning. However, the respect itself is not used for the upgrades. Instead, it's used to level up your character, with each level unlocking different upgrades, and there are plenty of them ranging from health, combat, abilities, and many more. The first level is a pretty standard upgrade, but again, like the weapons, there are 4 different tiers, and the higher your level, the better the upgrade. So while a 25% increase to rifle ammo is unlocked at level 5, unlimited rifle ammo is unlocked at level 50. The other catch is that these upgrades are unlocked with money, and they aren't cheap. If we take a look at Sprint, for example, a 25% increase in Sprint stamina will cost you $5,500, while unlimited Sprint costs $69,500. And let's say you want to do all 5 upgrades at once. That's a whopping $194,500, which does take some time to acquire depending on how you play the game. This isn't necessarily an issue once you find ways to make lots of money later on in the game, but in the early hours when you're trying to purchase weapon upgrades, properties, and so on, your money can feel spread out very thin. This can all be seen as a massive grind unless you put in some cheat codes, but there are multiple ways to earn respect and money that are still fun in their own way. Pretty much anything in Saints Row the Third gives out both story missions, diversions, and the infamous activities. Activities are designed differently from previous entries, where instead of having each level play out back to back at one location, you play one level of the activity on a certain difficulty. I like the way they're handled this time, resulting in shorter missions, making things less of a grind. Classics like Insurance Fraud, Mayhem, and Heliosol are still here, along with unique twists to others. Take Escort. There's still the normal version, but there's also Tiger Escort, where the Tiger will casually attack, causing us to swerve off the road. Another is Tank Mayhem, where you go around in a specific area doing what the name implies. Only this time, you're in a freaking tank. This mode is also where we can see how the Havoc engine has taken things up a notch in terms of physics. As you can see, running over different parts of the car crushes only that part. One of the standout new activities is Professor Genki's Super Ethical Reality Climax, where you go around an arena killing mascots and avoiding traps to earn money. You also get bonuses for landing headshots, one-hit kills, and shooting ethical targets. This was such a fun activity that, before the DLC, made me wish there were more of them. Diversions here are pretty much the exact same as before, so there's nothing really new to talk about here. It continues to be an amazing way to incentivize players by doing exactly what they were going to do anyway. You can actually keep track of them in the challenges menu on your phone. They pop up on the screen from time to time, showing you your progress, but I do wish there was some way to pin them to the side so I didn't have to open my phone constantly. This leads to other activities you can do in the Saints book. Assassinations and vehicle theft replace Hitman and Chop Shop respectively. Assassinations were still my favorite, since you had to perform a specific task before you could assassinate them. These could range from streaking in front of a church, sneaking up on a brute while he smells the roses, or jumping out of a jet while the target is still on board. With 31 contracts, there are plenty of fun and interesting ways to dispatch your targets. Chop Shop wasn't an activity I participated in before, but Saints Row the Third streamlined the process to make things quick and somewhat easy. Drive to the area the car is in, hijack, and deliver it. The variety of vehicles you can steal did make things interesting. One person will want a sports car, while others want boats or planes. The challenge comes with a high wanted level you get with some vehicles. Some cars are just way too slow and brought back nightmares from my time with Saints Row 1. They can also be buggy at times, like this boat that wouldn't point me in the right direction of our destination. Times like this did make things frustrating, but it was a nice way to earn additional money and respect. Just like activities, there are plenty of ways to earn money. Most of the money you earn will come from the hourly income you earn passively. Every in-game hour will get you a decent chunk of money from the different areas you own in Steelport, and this only goes up the more in control you are. You no longer control different hoods from completing story missions. You have to complete different operations like activities and gang operations, or buy different properties to gain even more money. After some time, you'll be earning plenty of money at a steady rate while taking control of Steelport one district at a time. Even with all of that stuff I just mentioned, there's still plenty you can do outside of the main story. There are dozens of collectibles spread around the city, like sex dolls, or survival against furries and zombies. There is also a new horde mode, which sadly took me way too long to understand. Just as the name implies, this sees you going wave by wave with a Saints Row twist. You face different enemies each round, like strippers and zombies, and you're given different types of weapons, and there are different modifiers in place for you and your enemies. Overall, this was a really fun mode, and I could easily waste a few hours in it if I had a few buds with me. With all of these different activities, you'll never be bored in the many hours you spend in this crazy world that is Steelport.
He doesn't care about rules of engagement.
No rules? I can work with that.
You're not ready to fight the Syndicate.
Watch us.
Just relax, Shandy. Alright, big man, what do you got?
The story for Saints Row the Third is easily the game's most polarizing aspect. Much like the rest of the game, it fully embraces the over-the-top nature, which is sadly where the game falls apart for many. While I think the story is entertaining, I do have some issues with how elements are handled and where the story goes. The craziness begins from the very beginning with a Star Wars inspired crawl showing how far the Saints have come from low-life gangsters to international celebrities. However, things are kept relatively grounded with the Saints robbing a bank dressed as Johnny Gat. Things go awry very quickly when the tellers end up attacking us. Now it's a full-on fight to the vault with a mysterious gang and eventually SWAT guys thanks to Josh. Everything's still on track with a chopper coming to lift the vault out of the bank. In a really cool sequence, we're dangling from the vault, shooting another chopper and dozens of SWAT guys. It's extremely chaotic. Unfortunately, the other chopper ends up crashing into us and we all get arrested.
Oh, shit.
This leaves Gat to contemplate where everything went wrong when the DeWinter sisters arrive to offer us a deal. On a plane over Steelport, we're introduced to Philip Loren, leader of the Syndicate and owner of the bank we just robbed.
Listen, you French fuck.
Please, I am Belgian.
So make yourself a fucking waffle. We done here.
They offer an outrageous deal, and when the opportunity arises, Johnny breaks free. He holds off the Morningstar as Shawnee and I find a way off the plane. Before making a free fall, we get one final message from Johnny Gat.
Johnny, we're about to jump!
Right on. I'll see you at Steelport.
Johnny?
Before moving on with the rest of the mission, I want to take some time to discuss Johnny's death, as it has major repercussions throughout the rest of the game. Let me just say, the idea of Johnny dying in this game wasn't a bad one. He has been a core member of the Saints since the very beginning, so if his death was handled properly, not only would it have had a major impact on the crew, but it also would have impacted us greatly. But as we all know, his death was not handled with any care. He's killed off screen and during the game's second mission. I'm honestly baffled by the decision to kill him off so early. While it serves as the catalyst for us to stay in Steelport and take on the Syndicate, the execution of his death could have been handled so much better to give it more impact. To dig the hole even deeper, we've seen important characters with way less screen time die off with more gravitas, like Lynn and Carlos, so the fact that Johnny went out with little to no fanfare is enough to rub people the wrong way, including myself. Nevertheless, we must continue with the rest of the mission. After getting knocked out of a plane, it's a free fall to Shandy until another plane heads right for us. Dropping her, we dive headfirst into the second plane and in the coolest way possible, grab another parachute and continue our descent. Landing in this new city called Steelport, Loren ensures we are set to our absolute lowest. To get back on our feet, we raid a military depot of its weapon supply and take it back to our new safe house. This is where the game opens up, allowing us to do whatever we want. But let's continue on with the story. After spending some time with Pierce and getting familiar with what we can do around the city, it's time for the game's most iconic mission. Pierce has discovered a place for us that is owned by the Morningstar, and they happen to be throwing a party, so we decide to crash it in style. Blasting through Morningstar with power blaring in the background is a moment in gaming I will not be forgetting anytime soon. Once the place is cleared, we chase one of the Morningstar gang members to help disarm a bomb that is set to go off. Now this place serves as the Saints' main headquarters. After an incredibly strong start to Act 1, the momentum comes to a screeching halt. The next few missions serve as glorified activities. Guess you gotta force them in here somehow. With Heli Assault, Guardian Angel, and another trip exploring what Steelport has, these missions were a complete waste of time. Depending on how you play, most of this is already gonna feel natural to you. I get the new stuff like stopping a gang operation or killing a brute, but I already know how to shop. I know how to customize my car. I don't think you need to make the player discover these new options during a mission. I believe we're smart enough to discover this stuff on our own. To make things worse, the next mission serves as a cutscene where the boss and Pierce figure out where Loren is. Now, this isn't something new to the series. Both games had this, but it was towards the end of the game. Having it this early is an interesting sign for what's to come. Luckily, the rest of Act 1 picks up speed as we look for Loren. Hitting up a place called Powder, we discover he just so happens to be in the tallest building in the city, the same building Pierce bet we would find him. Fighting our way through, we find pods full of brutes we encountered a couple times before.
How about bricks? They look like they're made of this stuff.
Bricks!
Really?
All right, what would you call him?
John!
You ain't getting how this works, sorry.
We even find the template, Oleg, who agrees to help us. Loren makes an escape, but we find an even faster way of catching him. Hanging from this giant structure, we drop it and it crashes right on top of Loren. At the end of this mission, we're greeted with something that's different for the series. We're given a choice. The bomb from the penthouse mission is sent to the tower, and we have two options. Blow up the building, sending a message and giving us a permanent respect bonus, or disarm the bomb, keeping the place for ourselves and giving us a permanent cash bonus. I found cash to be more of a necessity to me, so I decided to disarm the bomb. This gives us a short cutscene that ends Act 1 and sets up the tone for Act 2. For curiosity, I did do the same mission again, this time choosing the different option, resulting in this. The first set of missions in Saints Row the Third left me a bit mixed, but since it was relatively short, I don't think it was entirely that bad. It starts out incredibly strong, putting us back in the shoes of the Saints, establishing ourselves as a new threat in Steelport. It does dip in the middle when most of the time is spent completing activities and menial objectives we've already done before. This is probably the most perplexing aspect of the story to me, as it doesn't move the narrative forward at all. I think they should have been removed entirely from the campaign, as it only serves to drag out the story's playtime. And then there's the elephant in the room, which is the death of Philip Loren to cap off the end of Act 1. I can see why many were, and still are, upset with this choice. He was all over the marketing for the game, and to kill off the big bad so early is again very weird, but I will say was a bold choice that kinda works for me. It is anticlimactic, sure, but the game wasn't really doing a good job setting up Loren as an interesting leader in my eyes. It takes time for the game to establish how much of a threat these gangs are to the Saints, but at the end of it all, Killbane, who becomes the new leader of the Syndicate, worked a lot better for me. This takes us into the second act, where the crew is back in Stillwater to honor Johnny. On the Hughes Memorial Bridge, this is where we are first introduced to Monica Hughes, wife of late Richard Hughes from the first game. Everything is interrupted when the luchadors invade with an overwhelming force. The crew is pissed, but Oleg informs them of others who hate the Syndicate. There are 3 individuals we go after: Kinsey on a boat full of deckers, Zemos at a BDSM club, and Angel fighting off a group of luchadors. This is something I really do like, which is their reasons for wanting to fight with us. Kinsey has some beef with Matt Miller, Zemos was held captive by the DeWinters at the BDSM club, and Angel is someone who has gone face to face with Killbane in the past. While the boss canonizes them, we see the remaining leaders of the Syndicate choose a new leader. Now is probably a good time to discuss the different gangs in Steelport, along with how the game structures its story around them. First is the Morning Star, the oldest gang in Steelport and the most respected in the city. Ran by Philip Loren before his death and his lieutenants Viola and Kiki DeWinter, this European gang dons pink and red and are the richest gang out of the 3. Their main business is in arms dealing, but are also involved in human trafficking along with prostitution. The Deckers are computer geniuses and are led by Matt Miller. Dealing with money laundering and performing cybercrimes, they wear all black, with neon blue being their standout feature. Finally, the luchadors are masked wrestlers led by Killbane. They mainly deal with selling steroids along with gambling and are easy to identify with their bright red mask and camo uniforms. These gangs are drastically different from those we've seen in previous Saints Row games and are some of the most diverse sets coming from different parts of the globe. Something I do feel is missing is their personality. We never get to know these leaders too well, and it makes the enemies we're fighting pretty generic. The only one that gets the most development would be Killbane, but that's simply because he's in charge. Matt was boring to me throughout all of the game, and again, Loren wasn't given too much to work with. That's mainly because of how the game is structured, which brings me to my next point. Most of this game's story follows a fairly linear path. Each gang doesn't get a storyline like before, since they're all part of the Syndicate. There's no bad blood between any of them, which creates an interesting dynamic with everyone involved. I think switching it up and having a more straightforward story works, especially with the way it's told here. I prefer taking down one gang at a time anyway, so the only thing that is lost is deciding who you want to take down and in what order. But from a narrative standpoint, it makes sense to take on each gang in the order we do so. This takes us into the heart of Act 2, and yikes. This is the longest act in the game with 25 missions, and out of those, 10 of them are activities. Trailblazing, insurance fraud, escort, stuff we've already done before. On top of that, 3 more missions are only cutscenes, leaving us with 12 actual story missions. While the activities are short, I ask the same question as before. Why are they here? What's the reason for all the unnecessary filler? I would have just rather had 13 missions serve as Act 2 instead of taking time away from the story. Luckily, those 13 missions offer some of the game's better missions. Getting back into the flow, Pierce throws a party which upsets Shondi a lot since it's happening so soon after Johnny's funeral. Everyone just weirdly seems to blow it off and continues to have a good time with all the strippers hanging around. Only, these aren't your average strippers.
These hoes ain't hoes!
It's a fairly standard mission, but what makes it interesting is the cutscene at the end.
Hooker assassins?
They came highly recommended.
Ladies, it was a pretty shit plan.
Tell me something, Matt. Did you have a plan? How about you, Eddie? There's a reason Philippe left the thinking to us. We're done here.
Killbane!
Relax, we only need one of them.
We finally get to see more from these gangs, and it helps to make Killbane more of an intimidating antagonist. From here, putting an end to the Morningstar is the main focus. Auctioned off as a sex slave, we take down Safe Word in a sexually filled raid before stealing hoes from a Morningstar shipment in their final mission. I haven't mentioned this yet, but the game dials up the sex factor by 100%. The number of dildos and questionable creations I found, not only in the Morningstar missions, but in general, is insane. There's even a handful of missions where we pass through a strip club or see a stripper just randomly in the crowd. However, it was this mission that really put that into perspective. Once we rescue the hoes, we're presented with choice number 2. Matt Miller calls and bargains to have the girls return to the Morningstar. We can take them to Miller for an immediate payout, or keep them to get an increased hourly income. To me, it only made sense to keep them, because why would I trust somebody from the opposing gang for a quick payout? Zemos is my boy, and he's part of the crew for a reason. I did check though, and choosing the other option doesn't result in a different cutscene, which was a bit strange. With the Morningstar finished, it would only seem natural to move on to the next gang, but a new threat comes to Steelport. Meeting with Viola, who has defected from the Syndicate, a new group known as S.T.A.G attacks us. This new group has been teased throughout a couple of missions by Monica Hughes, but seeing the overwhelming power they possess is a neat way to start the mission. They're basically Ultor on steroids. With laser guns and heavily armored vehicles, they are an intimidating force, but we're able to hold our own. Here is where the game goes down its branching paths. We can continue making moves on S.T.A.G, but I want to take out the Deckers first. Killbane is live with Jane Valderrama trashing the Saint's name. With the help of Kenzie, we go to different radio towers to pinpoint the location of the broadcast. He escapes, so we take a chopper to him.
Gotcha.
Damn it! What did you do? What did I do? I don't fucking know! Learn to fucking fly!
You alright?
I had him!
I know. It's not your fault. Something weird happened. Shit.
Stealing a couple of highly sophisticated devices, Kenzie is able to transport us into a digital dystopian world to find Matt. This is by far the game's most unique mission, both from a visual and gameplay standpoint. There are 3 phases to the level, each possessing a different hindrance to us, like reversing our controls, making us lag, or slowing us down. The weirdest aspect is the text-based adventure we have to go through to progress through the mission. This is such a random inclusion that I found it to be pretty hilarious. Finding Matt's avatar, we engage in the game's first real boss fight. His dragon form is staggering, and we're only left to scramble across the battlefield until Kenzie transforms us into our own dragon, putting this fight on equal ground. Defeating Matt, he pleads for his life by helping us get our empire back. With our third and probably weakest choice so far, we can reduce the cost of vehicle customization or weapon upgrades. At this point in the game, I've upgraded the weapons I was going to upgrade, and I don't go to rim jobs a lot, but I ended up going with the reduced cost of weapon upgrades. With that, the Deckers are finished, resulting in Matt Miller leaving the city. Going back to S.T.A.G, these are some of the more entertaining levels to me. Nightblade has become the face of S.T.A.G, so Viola and I head to the station dressed as characters from the show to kidnap him, getting rid of their mascot. In a very quick turn of events, we take the fight to S.T.A.G.
Think you can pick a fight with S.T.A.G by yourself?
You have a booty call to get to?
Gonna pick up a surprise for S.T.A.G. You know how to use a Molotov?
Pierce, it's a fucking bottle.
Jesus, I was just asking.
Drawing their attention, we fight them on our home turf. After a long, intense battle, we meet Cyrus on the roof and are given our 4th choice. Return Josh to S.T.A.G and get assistance taking over the city, or keep him, getting Nightblade as our homie. I chose to give Josh back simply because I was going for the platinum trophy, and any help to make the process faster was extremely helpful. Plus, I don't use the homie system too much in these games, and Shaundi most likely would have killed him anyway. However, the fight with S.T.A.G isn't over yet. Shaundi has been captured, and in a clever plan, the boss gets plastic surgery to look like Cyrus and takes Viola and Pierce as prisoners.
Wrists out, handcuffs on. Quick, before we land.
This is a horrible idea.
Just do it already.
Look, you may be cool with wearing handcuffs, but this motherfucker ain't down with that.
What's that supposed to mean?
Well, you know, you ran a prostitution ring.
So clearly I'm into kink. You carry a gun. Does that mean you like to be shot?
No.
So how about we stop being a judgmental man-child?
Okay.
We get outed and must fight to the brig. Things go off without a hitch as we free Shaundi, Pierce, and Viola, and sink the ship in the process. This, however, does not sit well with Cyrus, as part of the city gets locked down, setting up the final act. There's still a lot to wrap up here, but this is the most consistent act in the game. Continuing the fight with S.T.A.G, a plane is making its way to Steelport. With the help of Viola, we hijack it, and in an attempt to take it over, things go really bad and the plane goes down. Free-falling in a tank, the mission ends with a zombie virus emerging on one of the islands. This is a new and somewhat forced addition to the game, but I'll touch on that a bit later. For now, I want to deal with Killbane, and that means setting up a fight with him at Murder Brawl. Angel is the only person Killbane fears, so we rejuvenate him by trashing a casino and getting his mask back, followed by a mission where we dispatch Killbane's opponents in vehicular accidents. This brings us to the main event. Getting the crowd riled up, Angel makes a surprise entrance and the match is on. We defend him from the side with urinals and sex dolls before he gets thrown out of the ring. We make our way in and fight Killbane ourselves. He's a tough opponent, with our punches not affecting him at all, so we have to rely on weapons thrown in from the crowd. Once we defeat him, this gives us choice number 5, take off Killbane's mask or spare him. The whole game has been leading up to this moment, so it made the most sense to unmask him. With that, all of the gangs in Stillwater have been defeated, but our journey is yet to be finished. In my penultimate mission, we meet with the mayor, the self-acclaimed
Burt fucking Reynolds?
He wants us to help with the zombie problem, so we head to the quarantine zone and submerge the containers with the virus into the water. This presents us with choice number 6. Destroy the virus for the mayor and unlock him as a homie along with the entire SWAT team, or deliver the virus to Oleg, giving us zombie homies. With this being my second to last mission, I honestly didn't care about either decision. I've made it clear that I don't use the homie system too much, so I decided to go with zombie homies. Burt Reynolds is probably a swell guy, but I figured, why not? Now it's time for the game's final mission. All-out war has broken loose. Going to different locations with Pierce and Oleg, we clear out any STAG and gang forces before we have to make our final choice. On one side of the map, we have Killbane fleeing Steelport. On the other side, Shaundi, Viola, and the mayor are tied up under a statue with bombs set to go off. It's time to choose. Personally, I feel like the choice is obvious, but for right now, let's go after Killbane. Heading to the airport, we shoot down his plane and engage in a QTE boss fight, killing him off and ending the Syndicate once and for all. The bomb goes off and Pierce leaves us with a lingering question.
Kill that son of a bitch?
Yeah.
Was it worth it?
This opens up another mission where we put one final stop to S.T.A.G. They come back to Steelport in a full-on assault. Heading to the data list, we plant bombs before putting an end to both Cyrus and S.T.A.G.
Kinsey, round up every saint we can find. We're going on a field trip.
Now for what I consider to be the good ending, which is rescuing our friends. Making our way to the statue with Holding Out for a Hero blaring in the background, we remove the bombs before killing Kia, Cyrus's second in command. He's ready to gun us down before Monica Hughes applauds us for our efforts. However, there is one more thing to do. On the surface of Mars, our mission is to stop Killbane before he destroys Earth. Disabling 3 sets of force fields and losing homies along the way, we engage in one final fight. It's kind of lackluster, but the game's final moments make up for it.
But I found something that... Damn it. Line.
Cut!
While it was kind of obvious, it's revealed we are taking part in the Gangstas in Space movie. As they get ready for another take, the game comes to an end. With the story fully recapped, I don't think it's as bad as people make it seem. It certainly isn't the best it could have been, but there are definitely some bright spots. I can see why most people who have been part of the series since the first or even second game can be disappointed with the direction Volition went with the story. I wasn't against these changes too much. While the wackiness that came from the game is a result of trying to differentiate itself from GTA and find a more consistent tone, I thought Saints Row the Third finds a pretty good balance of creating these crazy experiences while keeping one foot in reality. However, in this effort of trying to find a more consistent tone, it can lose focus at times. While I can appreciate what the game is going for, there are some cases where I think things went way too far and didn't work too well for me. The introduction of zombies is the biggest element. This plotline is brought in really late, and I don't feel like it was necessary. Now when it comes to the lore of Saints Row, zombies aren't new. You had zombie homies in the last 2 games, and there was a zombie minigame in Saints Row 2. However, it feels really forced here. I'm pretty confident this is a result of the zombie craze that was sweeping all sorts of media during the late 2000s. Every game seemed to have zombies, and Saints Row the Third was another one that joined the bandwagon. Don't get me wrong, it's fun fighting hordes of zombies for hours on end, and I don't want to say it feels out of place here because we fight literal aliens in the next game, but I think more could have been done to make this edition more worthwhile. Another trend that was sweeping the gaming industry at the time was having player choice. While this can also be another result of the scrapped projects from Volition, I don't feel like this game was the right fit for it. Besides the final mission, it doesn't change anything regarding the story and instead offers different perks. This is nice, and I can applaud them for not having choices that are arbitrarily good or evil. It just would have been nice if these choices had some substance. Most of them don't even play anything different when making the other choice, which can feel unrewarding at times. What could have been nice is if it affected the world around you. An example of this could be after the Deckers Die mission. Say you chose the decision I make to decrease the cost of weapon upgrades. Whenever you go into friendly fire, your face is plastered somewhere saying you're their biggest customer or just something along those lines. This does, however, lead me to the game's ultimate decision, the final mission. End Killbane or save your friends. This is the only choice in the game that has major ramifications, and I feel a bit mixed here. If we take a look at the ending where we go after Killbane, I don't feel like the way the game conveys making this choice is very good. Angel calls and tells you we can't let him get away. With just that, I'm personally not convinced to go after Killbane. We already got our comeuppance at Murder Brawl, and it seems like Angel and Viola have more ill will towards him than I do. If we follow through with this choice, the final mission where we take down Cyrus and S.T.A.G is much more satisfying. We rid Steelport of its major threats, but like Pierce said, was it all worth it? Now, as for the other ending, it does feel good saving those who have been down with us throughout not only this game, but even further back. There honestly isn't too much to discuss here. Maybe the only bad thing is the final fight with Kia can be anticlimactic, but I think the story wraps up just as well as the other ending. However, I think it would have been better if this just wasn't a choice at all. Instead, I would have liked if they combined all of these elements into one sequence. Rescue Shaundi, Viola, and the mayor, and then go after Killbane. I mean, we have a VTOL. How hard would it have been to chase down his plane? After going after Killbane, we put an end to S.T.A.G with everyone tagging along, and then wrap it up with gangstas in space. I think this would have resulted in a better ending, so you don't have one that feels like a waste of time. But let's not linger on the negatives. What does the story get right? Characters are still engaging this time around, especially the boss. The chemistry between everybody is put on full display, and interacting with every single person, new and old, was a joy. The statement from one of the developers about the boss not being a dick painted them in a different light that I can appreciate. I wouldn't necessarily criticize the last game for how they portrayed the boss, but as I mentioned in my previous video, some of their actions were extreme at times. All of our actions here felt justified, and while I'm not the biggest fan of the choice mechanic, it did help me connect with my version of the boss even more. They're still an admirable leader who puts their friends over anything else. Shaundi and Pierce are still the heart of the team. Pierce is given a much bigger role, with a good chunk of missions having him as your companion, bringing some lighthearted fun to these missions. Shaundi, however, isn't given as much to do here as I would have liked. Much of her time is spent mourning for Johnny, which is understandable, but the fact that this is her only character trait in this game is very disappointing. Gone is the smart, strategic, and fun Shaundi for someone who seems to be angry at everyone.
Hey girl, what are you up to?
On my way to kill Pierce.
What'd he do?
He's throwing a fucking party. Can you believe that shit?
Sadly, yes. Have you asked him why?
He probably wants to get some tits shoved in his face.
I'm sure he has a better reason. How about...
Fuck his reason. It's not right. Not after Johnny's funeral.
All right. Let me talk to him. Promise me you won't do anything until I get to the crib.
Fine. Whatever.
Sure, people grieve in their own way, but I don't think it was fair putting it all on Shaundi. I find it odd because Shaundi and Johnny hardly spent any time together in the last game, so it was hard for me to believe she cared for him that much. What makes this even weirder is that the boss doesn't feel nearly as upset considering they've been with him since the beginning. Aside from the old crew, the new cast of characters are just as memorable and were excellent additions to the crew. Oleg, Kinsey, Zimos, and Angel all bring a fun and new perspective to the series. While some are definitely more interesting than others, each one of them has a moment that helps them shine. Whether it's Zimos carrying us on a chariot, or the weird items in Kinsey's hideout, these moments added personality to these characters and helped to make them memorable. This brings me to another positive aspect, which is the refreshing mission design. If we look past the filler missions, most of the actual story missions were extremely fun. Much like Saints Row 2, you're never doing the same thing twice, and this is where we can truly see how balls to the wall the game can get at times. These missions showcase the amount of creativity that Volition had in store. There was so much to do in Saints Row the Third that I spent well over 30 hours doing everything that the game had to offer. This was the first game in the series that I decided to 100%, and I was left extremely satisfied by the end of it. Before we wrap up, we got to talk about the DLC. There is a huge amount of content that came after the release, but most of them are clothing and vehicle packs. A very random inclusion I want to talk about is the Penthouse Pack DLC, which includes, you guessed it. Okay, seriously, I want to know who the horny bastards are behind these ideas. Moving on from that, There are 3 pieces of DLC that add additional levels to the game. Starting with Genki Bowl, this adds more content to the Genki Bowl activity, like causing mayhem in a giant ball of yarn, giving him pleasure by killing pedestrians around town, and Sad Panda Skyblazing. This is the only one that isn't a copy of another activity. Here you're skydiving through flaming rings while bouncing off balloons, or killing mascots to get additional cash. This entire DLC was a fun addition to the game, and I'm glad we were able to get more out of the Genki side activity. Gangstas in Space sees the boss take part in a Saints-themed movie production. Co-starring with an actress playing an alien called Quilana, this DLC follows your standard open world structure like killing X number of enemies, hacking machines, and controlling a spacecraft. What makes these missions unique is that it's framed like an actual movie. Different filters, letterboxing, scripted moments, and an alien arsenal really spice up what could have been a generic piece of DLC if it wasn't handled properly. What makes this interesting is the relationship between the director, Quilana, and the boss. Whatever we do gets praise from Andy, but comes off as a dick towards Quilana.
Cut! What the hell was that, Jemima? A child could have made that jump! A crippled child that was blind!
Hey, back off before I feel the need to get violent.
Listen, I'm really sorry. Please, please don't let this ruin our relationship.
This happens over the entire DLC, and this build-up causes Quilana to kill the director in the final mission. To be honest, he had it coming. The final piece of DLC is Trouble with Clones. After a superfan creates a horrifying clone of Johnny Gat, it's up to us to find him. Things get off to a rocky start with the first mission. You're stuck riding shotgun in a car that gets ripped to shreds by the military. It took me quite a few tries to get past this. Luckily, the next 2 missions pick things up. With Pierce dressed as Aisha and us in a bee suit, we go to Planet Saints, where Pierce puts on a hilarious performance of a song that is pretty catchy.
You can bounce like my checks did back in the day. Roll it like that, like that. Roll it around and make it clap.
While I defend the stage with a gun that shoots bees. We're able to calm Johnny down with a clone version of Aisha, but she gets killed pretty quick, leaving Johnny to go on another rampage. We find him, but he knocks me out cold. We wake up and something has happened. We have superpowers. With my super speed, super strength, and fireball, we go around town looking for Johnny while defeating anyone who gets in our way. Finding him on a bridge, we defend him from the military. Once we're able to calm him down for good, he is welcomed to the Saints. This was by far my favorite DLC out of the 3. It was consistently funny and was great seeing Johnny again, even if he was a giant brute. Of course, we have to talk about the short segment where we had superpowers. This was definitely a testbed for what we would have gotten in the Enter the Dominatrix DLC, which ended up in Saints Row 4. It's another aspect that made this DLC stand out amongst the 3. The production quality with all 3 were on par with the base game, keeping things consistent. They served their purpose, which was giving players a fun time in 3 self-contained stories. As an entire package, Saints Row the Third has a ton of content packed in that will keep players entertained for dozens of hours on end. Everything from its story, side activities, and DLC are all worth diving into.
Unless the next thing out of your hole is thank you, we got a serious fucking problem.
They have a point, Commander. Like it or not, the Saints are heroes.
Is Saints Row the Third as bad as people say it is? Not by a long shot. While the story isn't as compelling or as consistent as it could have been, and the world isn't very interesting, I would be lying if I say I didn't have a blast playing this game. The gameplay is the best it's ever been, and the fun factor is completely off the charts. It doesn't have enough juice to overtake Saints Row 2, and in some cases even Saints Row 1, but that doesn't diminish what Saints Row the Third was trying to accomplish. I think for the most part, the new elements the game introduced work for this entry. They're all wonderful changes that help make the game stand out in a sea of other open world games. I really enjoyed my time with Saints Row the Third and look forward to how the series holds up as we move on to Saints Row 4. That does it for the video. Thank you all for watching, and I really want to know your thoughts on Saints Row the Third. With this one being more of the divisive game in the franchise, it would be nice to know how people feel about this game. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and I will see you guys next time.